Okay.
All right, I'll speak directly into the microphone. Okay, so welcome everybody. This is an informational meeting so that we can talk about our combining the church services to get a consensus from the congregation. And as I mentioned, Carolina is recording this and it will be broadcast. So if you miss something during the course of it, you can always go back and play it again. So at the start of every important function, it's always important to say a prayer. So I invite Pastor Doug to open us up with a prayer.
Yeah, when I was sitting down below, I realized people have told me this is kind of a little shadow area here. So I'm much better looking the dimmer the light. But I don't know if I have the same reflection off my head that Dennis has with the light. Okay, so not, right now I got to dig myself out of a pretty deep hole here. No better way to do it than to pray. So let's pray. Lord, you've been faithful to our congregation. Among people we've never met long ago, you have sustained this gathering of people, this body of Jesus in this city. And now we are here in the present day. We want to be faithful. We want to do what is most aligned and effective with your purposes. And so we gather as your people, so open our hearts to hear from each other. Send your Spirit among us. As the scriptures said today, we should be slow to speak, but quick to listen, and slow to get angry. That doesn't mean that things won't rile us up, but to be thoughtful about it. So as we go and we express ourselves and listen to other people, Lord, let us be led by your Spirit, the Spirit of wisdom, and not from other places. So thank you for all who are present today. Thank you for your goodness to us. Be with us now in this time. In Jesus' name, amen.
Okay, so thank you very much, Pastor. So I just made a few notes by way of introduction here, so you'll have to bear with me. So the history of our congregation has always been strong, faith-based, and welcoming to all people. So with a strong need for fellowship, as we are all servants of God. So and supporting and enjoying one another in all our church activities. And we demonstrated our love of God and Christ with all our outreach in the programs and the ministry work that we do and have done by providing support to neighbors and the community, particularly our hunger action programs. And I know we love to worship together. So it was interesting to listen to Pastor in his sermon talk about that, because he and I didn't compare notes, but a lot of what I'm saying or thinking is really what he said. So why this meeting? We're having this meeting so that I can just give you a brief explanation of how we got here today and also to talk about the way forward. And so the way to move us from this kind of treadmill we seem to have been on for the last couple of years and try to find a way to go ahead as a congregation. So, as you all know, under Reverend Kevin, we had a long period of time where we formed our TLC. They developed our vision, our values, and a mission. And so we have this new mission. And so we had it out there, but I began to think of, well, how do we implement that mission? It's great that we have this 2.5 years of work and the statement, but now how do we do it? What do we do now that we have it? What does it really mean for us as a congregation? So I thought the best way was to form a group, and I called it the Mission Implementation Team. And it was made up of 7 or 8 or 9 people in our congregation. And they met on multiple occasions for several months. And they produced a product. And they provided that product to the governing board. And the governing board reviewed that, and we kind of synthesized all the input that we got, and we came up with what I'm calling the way forward. So, and that's the document that was handed out this morning. And we're going to talk about those in just a minute. So all of this to say is that when we started the summer schedule of a combined service, it was for practical reasons, because we've done it before. It's for July and August now. That's what we said. And that there's summer vacation time, and we changed the hours to make it earlier to hopefully be more convenient for people so they could come to church, but yet still have the day ahead so that they could do things with their families. And so what we discovered, there were some impacts and outcomes from being together in a combined service. And so there was feedback that was provided by people that attended those services, and it was like, wow, this is really great. It's nice to be together, and it's nice to have so many people, and it's nice to hear us singing together and worshiping together. And so there was this feedback, and there was joyful faces and joyful and invigorated conversations, both before service and after service and at coffee fellowship. And so what we discovered was that it gave the congregation strength, and it demonstrated a healthy congregation, at least in my opinion, and facilitated congregational fellowship in terms of worshiping together. And so there was a lot of positive impact of worshiping together. So it did highlight to me the outcomes, how a united congregation worshiping together. So the combined attendance showed a strength of congregation and demonstrates a healthy congregation. So it's one thing if you have 2 smaller groups, which we did before we started that. But it's amazing how when you put those 2 groups together and we're united in one sitting, one gathering, to worship God, that there is a strength and a healthy congregation that is palpable. So it also facilitates the fellowship because we're gathering together as believers. And there is strength in assembling together before and during and after the church service. And by being together, we stir up one another to love one another and to continue our good works. So there are some options. So what we're kind of presenting here is the fact that we want to do a single service after the summer period. So we want to make it standard practice to have a single service at 9:30 on Sunday mornings to alternate perhaps between the chapel and the sanctuary, because there are some people in our congregation that really love the chapel. They love the sanctuary too, but they really love the chapel, and vice versa, shall we say. So the idea is to perhaps alternate Sundays between one location and the other. And that would be except for like holidays, Christmas or Easter, or special events such as homecoming or maybe something other similar. And an option would be to have communion on every Sunday. We've been doing that through the summer. People like that. So if we want to continue that, we certainly can. And so while I understand, changing from the two services, 8:30 and 10, that change is not always easy. We are seeking the greater good with unity and fellowship for us all. So that's my remarks. After we talked about this, I will want to return to what I'm calling the way forward, but we want to deal with this particular topic. And so at our recent board meeting, we decided it would be a good idea to have an informational meeting, which is what we're having now, so that members of the congregation can share their points of view about what we are proposing. So I will allow anyone that wants to share a point of view to please maybe queue up on the side, and in order to make this heard by all, please come up here to the pulpit to share your point of view. So Ellen, come on.
Good morning. I'm in support of having one congregation service. I remember when I first came to the church, people were still talking about the 11 o'clock service. And people were talking about how we used to have 3 services, 8, 9:30, and 11. And I was told because there were less people coming to church, they had to decrease it by 1 service. I think we're at another crossroads that we need now to decrease it to 1 in order to be stronger. Help me with this, Pastor. And forgive me, I'm a bookworm, so I can't pronounce words right. Is it Ezekiel's? There's a section in it where they talk about 1 strand not being strong, 2 strands are stronger. Thank you, sir. And then 1 strand is weak, but 2 strands are stronger. and a third standing stronger. I think that's what's going on. We need to come together and be one. And that's all I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. Dennis?
Good morning, my friends. I just want to let you know, first of all, that I have utmost respect for Doug, for Dennis, for Ellen, but I'm also going to be contrary to what they say. First of all, when two or three are gathered in my name, the Lord is there. I believe that. I always have. But I have a preference. I have the preference of doing a 8:30 service. It works my schedule, you know. At times, if we go to 9:30, I would be unable to attend to the service here because of issues that we have. I also like starting my day early and starting it with prayer and service and in words of wisdom, and it's always great. I don't see the disadvantage of having to, because I do feel united with even the people that go to the 10. I know most of you, and I definitely respect and love all of you. You know, there's somebody here like say, "Oh no," I do, and we do share fellowship together sometimes in between service. So I don't see a disadvantage of having two services. I come from a multi background where we multiple services throughout the on the Sunday, some even on Saturday night, Catholic, 3 or 4, and I don't think it diminished the sense of unity. They all felt that they were one, and so I don't see the need for separation. I always thought at the 8:30, I can't speak a great deal about the 10, but I felt that the 8:30 we had a great spirit, great energy. I don't see combining to make the energy greater or anything. And I know for some people I have heard, and so I'm not speaking about my own personal, they have a tough time starting services early. 10 o'clock for some is even a challenge. So I think you got to think about those people too that don't have a chance or feel rushed to come to even a 9:30 service as opposed to a 10. I don't see the advantage of going to 2. I do feel united, even though we are 2. We do many things together, fairs and meals and different things, and I think those are great. But like I said, I have an idea. If you want to come to unified service once a month, I think to make sure we stay unified, it'd be great. But I don't see the need for one service only.
Okay, thank you, Dennis, and thank you, Ellen. Is there anyone else that would like to share some thoughts about this? Russ, yes. I can relay if that would help, Russ. Okay. I don't think it comes off. No, it doesn't. Okay.
See, where there's a will, there's a way, right? Good morning, everyone. Good morning. So just a couple of thoughts about this proposal. I personally feel that when we're all together like this, I mean, to look out and see this many people in this room right now is wonderful, and it's encouraging. And I think it's the way to go. I understand Dennis's points of view as well, and those people that prefer the chapel and an earlier service. Sometimes we have to do things that we're not all that comfortable with or maybe totally in favor of. But it's a compromise world, isn't it? I'd like to make one comment about swapping between rooms from chapel to sanctuary. one of the things that will limit us going forward as we look at some of the other way forward opportunities in terms of building use is, how can I put this? We have an opportunity to bring Cana back into our midst, who was a very good partner and was contributing a decent amount of money to our coffers every month. But they really need to have more flexibility than we were willing to give them in the past. So I'd like to consider this. And what I'm suggesting is that they need more time to get their service ready in the morning. When we were down there at 8:30, getting out at 9 or 9:15, didn't give them enough time to get ready for their musicians. Their worship services are very, very much focused on music, on Christian music. And their musicians are a very, very important part of that worship. So we could have Cana back into our midst very easily if we could give them more unrestricted time in the chapel. And by switching back and forth between sanctuary and chapel, it kind of limits our ability to do that. We could still have two services, but we could use this room. And I know that flies. I love the chapel too, okay? But faced with the opportunity of bringing in much needed income versus sacrificing my love of the chapel to come to the sanctuary, I certainly would be willing to do that. So that's my perspective. Thank you. I'm going to want to come back and speak again. So can I sit in that chair?
Sure, here, come right here. Take a run.
Okay, no, that's okay. I'm going to sit up here.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
My turn. Anyways, if we keep this away from you,
My little brother Kenny.
you don't hear the P as much, you know? So I was just thinking about this morning. I've been in this church all my life. And we had 3 services because we had the early service, and that was the adults kind of that want to go golfing and all that stuff. And then the middle service was kind of, okay, you had the Sunday school and everything else was part of that time frame. And then the 11 o'clock service was for the later group. I guess they wanted to go out to lunch together or whatever it was. But now the opportunity of, and also think about the deacons or the worship team that sets up the hall. They got to do it downstairs, upstairs on the same day, for alternating services, of course. So it's with this day and age we have with video, photography, and all that stuff that goes out, to the interweb, whatever you want to call it, that you'd be setting that up in 2 places, every other week. So it becomes apparent, I think, for many people to set up this place like a studio and have it right there, So, and you could do other things with that as well, weekday things. You have meetings and things of that thing. Yeah, I know it's a sacred place, but it's still a meeting room. And we still need to have value for our buildings. So I think it would be more apparent, and it's kind of, I don't want to say it's selfish for us to say, let's use both rooms, because we may be down to a senior center someday, and we're going to have to face the facts that if we're not going to grow our church, the 10 o'clock service was for the parents. Like my daughter was here this morning with her kids. They got here, we're not getting that anymore. And maybe because we're thinking about ourselves more than other people sometimes. So just my point.
I have a question. How big is the Cana congregation? Yeah. Would they consider using the sanctuary instead of the chapel?
Sure they would.
Maybe that's the solution.
So Amanda, you're suggesting that we just have our church chapel and allow Cana to use the sanctuary?
I'm going to come wherever it is.
I understand. Yes, you're right.
But I was just thinking of the room, and if,
put it this way, they have more people coming to their service on a Sunday than we do.
They have musicians, it's more room.
Okay, so Russ just said they have more people coming to Sunday service than we do, but they have more people than this? I'm not sure of that, Russ.
Well, all I know is they fill the chapel every time they use it. I mean, it's filled every seat.
Just one thing, Amber, if we let them have this and we go to chapel, we have no room for our choir. And I think we're losing a lot of our choir. We have no room for our choir. There's no room downstairs to have a whole choir.
Okay, so Marion's point was if we give up the sanctuary and stay in the chapel, then there's no room for the choir in the chapel. And in fact, I just saw a notice that said choir was going to be starting again probably in September. So, that's a point to consider. Alan.
The choir has come many times in that chapel. And I there's plenty of room for the choir to sing, and you sit in a couple front pews, you get up, you march a little penguin, sit in front of the piano, and sing, there's plenty of room.
Okay, so Alan's point is that there is room in the forward pews for the choir to sit and then move to the front of the altar there in the chapel, sing, and then go back to their chair. So that's a way of doing it. Okay, any other points of view?
Yes, I need to add something. If you don't mind. This is not necessarily directly, well, it's indirectly connected to the question that we've got in front of us right now about the combined services. But I want to talk to you about Cana I was in top leadership position when Cana first came and became part of our church family. At that time and since that time, I've considered them to be a potential answer to our prayer, because what they have is what we don't have. They've got a whole bunch of families with young children. And my idea, my thought, my dream at the time, and maybe it's time to begin to discuss and begin to consider this, whether or not this dream would be worthwhile pursuing, is that if we were to somehow, I know one of the things that the MIT was talking about was maybe combining with another church, merging with another church. What better church to merge with than Cana Community Church? They know us. They've been part of us. We're no longer, I don't think, frightened by their worship style. I think it's something that we should consider as part of, or keeping our mind anyways, as part of this decision to combine services. We could solve a lot of problems, I think, going forward if we did that. Thank you. Yes, Joyce.
One thing to also consider, on the major holidays, you said you would like to keep the sanctuary, and you mentioned that we have the major holidays. Well, I think even if Cana was using this, there would be an accommodation for that to continue going forward on Christmas and Easter.
Absolutely. I mean, there have been several times in the past when on the major holidays, we actually have worshiped together, not only as our congregation, but we've invited them to come, and it's been a wonderful experience, I think. So, Richard.
Have they actually come back to thinking?
Yes, they had a conversation. David Gentleman, last you heard was what? Well, of course they're in question because they need to have more flexibility. That's the only reason that they're questioning, okay, that their ability to come back. But David Gentleman, Pastor David, had a meeting with Pastor Doug, right? You talked with David Gentleman. And David expressed his desire to be able to come back, but the fact that they just need more time to get ready in the morning, okay, for their service, which starts at 10. And yes, I have.
What does he
He's saying that that he thinks that they would love to come back if they could have less restriction on the use of the space. And it's simple as that. And I understand where they're coming from. Because so much of their service is centered on the music. It's really a music service with a message from David, followed by communion every Sunday. That's their style. That's their modus operandi. They worship through their music, which is very uplifting. So I just want people to consider that and think about that, rather than closing off these opportunities that I think the Lord is giving us. I think the Lord is putting these opportunities in front of us, and we just have to open our eyes and say, oh, wow. Many of you may remember a prayer that I wrote a few years ago. It was called Dear God, and it was a conversation between God and Greendale People's Church. Dear God, have you forgotten us? And God answers, how could I forget you? Well, our congregation is shrinking. Things are getting tough. What are we going to do? He says, well, I've sent, open your eyes. First of all, it's not your church, it's our church, meaning God and us. He said, I've sent you 2 other churches. Open your eyes, between Cater and Wims. And I just think we need to open our eyes and open our hearts. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Russ. So it is interesting that Pastor David has spoken to Russ, but as far as I know, when Pastor Doug and Pastor David spoke, there was a lot of ambiguity about what their status was, and even if they might or could return because of the change that occurred in the last 15 months due to COVID amongst their own congregation. So it would be nice if Pastor David spoke with our own pastor or folks on the board or the deacons so that we can address that appropriately, because quite honestly, this is the first that I heard about that. Lorna.
They're doing it all online right now.
It's all online because of the COVID-19.
Well, because we made it clear that nobody could come back and use the building.
Right.
Let me clarify something, Dennis, about the communication. The last communication I had with David Gentleman was he wrote me an email and said, I haven't heard anything back from your governing board. Should I assume that it's a no? He was expecting to hear from you based on his conversation with Doug. So there's been a communication problem. So what do you want to do going forward? You want me to have him call you? Because
I think the 2 pastors should speak to one another before it comes to the governing board.
Which they did.
I think the train has left the rails a bit in this meeting. This meeting was intended to be about Greendale People's Church, about our worship on Sunday morning and our desire to be united and to have a substantial group meeting. Suddenly this conversation has become more about another congregation than us. And I don't think that's appropriate for this meeting right now. When I spoke with David Gentleman, he had said they had lost families during COVID because they weren't meeting. So he had said their congregation was fewer people than it had been. But the main topic had to do with the preparation for their services. Their musicians need lots of time. And when we have a service in the chapel, they don't have that kind of time. And it really puts them way off balance as far as they're starting. So the conversation with him mostly pertained to that. Uh, you know, my interest is in Greendale People's Church. Greendale's People's Church as a worshiping body, as a body of Christ, and not as a name at the top of a bank account that we want to replenish more than we have, to fill our coffers with more money. God sends a pastor into a church to lead the people spiritually, rather than to try to figure out ways to make more money. So my main concern pertains to this congregation, and I thought it would be more beneficial to our congregation to be united. Should anybody want to visit our church and they come in and see what we saw today, probably 60 people, it's more substantial. There's more energy than when there's 12 downstairs and 20 some up here. I remember a Sunday when I had been in communication with someone who was moving into this area, and they were interested in our church. They'd been watching our services online during COVID. They came. There were, I think that Sunday, maybe 24 people up here, a lot of empty pews. It just wasn't exciting. So I think having twice that number of people, for some reason, when we're up here, we have more than we would have 8:30 plus 10 o'clock. So my concern has to do with Greendale People's Church, our future, our viability as a congregation, the work of God among us, and not what may be going on with other congregations. I don't besmirch them. I wish them well. I think David Gentleman is a very nice man. He's a great gentleman, no pun intended. I wish the church well. He had told me they're struggling. So anyhow, I think we need, for this meeting, we should get the train back on the rails.
Right. Thank you. Thank you, Pastor. And thank you, Russ, for your points of view. So getting back to the purpose of our information meeting, and that is, do we want to have a single service or not? Okay. And so the details of how that would take place is something that can be worked out. And we can talk about lots of the details. But let's get to the fundamental question. The one question is, do we have a single service after homecoming or not? At 9:30, single service in our church building. Could be sanctuary. I mean, based on what I'm hearing, maybe it's in the chapel, maybe it's here. That doesn't need to be solved right now. What we do need to solve is, are we having one church service at 9:30 on Sunday mornings? So I would like to get a consensus. This is not an official church meeting, although we have enough people to vote. But I don't think we need a vote. I think we just need a consensus of the congregation that's here. So I guess if you're in favor of a single service, just raise your hand. Okay, so
That's a consensus.
as Russ said, as an unbiased observer, that's a consensus. We do hear what Dennis's message and voice, and I understand other people have similar thoughts. But the idea is for the overall congregation. And so we are agreed that going forward, we will have a single service at 9:30. And so the details will be worked out, with the deacons and with the governing board and with the pastor. And so just as a thought, okay, if we give up one place or the other, whether we give up the chapel for Cana, if indeed they want to come back, or if we give up the sanctuary and we go down there, still, people that want to come to the sanctuary are not going to be happy, and people that want to go to the chapel are not going to be happy. So our thought was, let's try to make everybody happy by going between the two. And so I think right now, until there is something clear that we need to talk about further, then we're going to go with one service in the two locations, alternating between each until there's a change to that. And if there is, we'll let you know. Okay? And basically, communion will be available every Sunday for those that want to take communion. You don't have to if you don't want to, but if you want to, it will be available. Right, Pastor?
Yeah, and you know, the plastic crinkling and all that, we're gonna have to live with for a while longer because we're not really out of the woods with COVID yet. We still need to exercise some caution, and we'll continue to do, you know, our own little habits.
Okay, so that's the game plan for right now. Any other comments about our game plan right now and going forward? Good, thank you very much. Okay, so now I just want to move forward. I'm not going to take up the whole morning, but I just want to bring out just a couple of points of view. You all should have got a copy of the way forward. So it talks about 4 different areas. And primarily what we're talking about is number 1 here this morning. So to continue our religious education, and that is putting the emphasis on the church remaining Christ-centered and continue to provide and be the best Christian worship services for our attendees and our virtual congregants. And we solved the 9:30 question. And so we just want to be sure that our church is solidly Christian-based and provides a strong message every Sunday to not only our congregation, but to the community. We've invited the community to come. I have seen people, new people. I see Mr. Ralph comes every Sunday, usually an elder gentleman sits in the back. I've seen a younger lady named Morgan, who wasn't here today, but she has been here at least on 3 weeks that I'm aware of. And she likes coming because of the message. So we need to continue to give a strong Christian message on Sundays because that's what's going to bring people in. So that's the whole number 1. The primary focus is sending God's word to not only us, but feeding the community with God's word. So with regards to the building status, the board has agreed that we want to kind of open our building as we can moving forward. It doesn't mean it's going to be open like it was before the pandemic because there's still stuff out there. So we need to be reasonable about outside folks coming in and using the building. We have a facility team. They will evaluate any requests from users that were here before and any new users. And so there's a process for kind of vetting or reviewing requests, and then we will make a decision on those. So the building is available for possible use, but it's not throw the doors open and everybody that was here before come back, because we can't do that right now. So we want to continue also, as part of our mission, all those hunger action items that we were doing. That is the food pantry, the monthly dinner at the Mustard Seed, the monthly food at the Worcester Fellowship, the QCC a meal for the students there if they want to come. So we want to continue that. And the key is that we have to have enough volunteers to make all that possible. And you've all seen my notes about volunteering, because we can't really do things unless we have the people available to do them. Okay, the other is on communications efforts. It was clear that we need to continue our virtual services. So it's important for us to meet as a congregation in church, but there are reasons why some people cannot be here. And so we want to continue our support for those folks that cannot be here. And not only that, but there are people outside of our community that are a long ways away that we are aware of that are watching our virtual service. So that's a good, positive thing. And we know that some people have trouble with their computer. And so we've made a point of every weekly newsletter gets mailed to anyone who wants those weekly notices. It gets mailed to them. And Karen does that faithfully every Monday. And so, if you or anyone else wants a hard copy of the bulletin or the newsletter, then you just need to let the office know, and we'll continue to mail them to everybody. So it's a dual thing. The other thing is we're starting a social media focus group, a team. And it's going to be led by Russ. Surprise! No, he's not surprised. So he volunteered. So anybody interested in working on that team to get the word out into using social media methods, Facebook or Twitter or whatever else people use to get the word out, we need to focus. We need to form a team to get our word out. And so Carolina is our communications person. She's got the first and foremost responsibility, but her duties don't allow her to do just that, because that can be time consuming. She needs to focus on what she's been doing, and Russ is going to augment Carolina and the team that's going to work with Russ. And so the messages are going to be coordinated and approved and then put on social media. It's not willy-nilly, everybody can say whatever they want. No. We're not having any of that. It's going to be coordinated, controlled, and guided. Okay, and so the last item has to do with the facilities and finances. And so we know everyone's concerned about the church's finances and our facilities. So many times in years past, we've had to reach into our endowment funds to cover our annual operating expenses. So what I've asked is for our finance team, the treasurer, the stewardship team people, to work with our endowment fund providers, advisors, and to look at the funds that we have and to project how long those funds would continue to be available, given the fact that we developed a balanced budget, but we are behind in our budget for this year. We've got some unexpected expenses that are occurring this year. That is the wall that fell down over here on our property. That's, I think, going to be $40,000 or thereabouts. We've got 2 boilers that potentially need to be replaced. We did one, but there's 2 more that are hanging out there. So those are $10,000 each. And so, and our giving is decreased. It's not meeting the budget line, shall we say. So we know the wall, we know the boilers, we know the budget. So if we have to take money from the endowment fund to balance what we're doing, that is to keep the church going, to pay the salary of our staff, the pastor, Carolina, the music director, and we just hired a new custodian. So those are the 4 places that we've got personnel expenses. The other expenses really have to do with the building. And certainly there's some administrative expenses in running the office and doing those things. But so if our income doesn't meet that, we do have money and we'll continue to use that money. But at some point, that money's going to shrink to a point where it won't be available for us. And so that's what I've asked the finance team to look at and try to make a projection and then come back to the board so we can understand what maybe the timeline might be for a tipping point where if you get to a certain amount of money, you're now in jeopardy, Greendale People's Church. And while there's still some there, you really need to think about doing something different. So that's still to be done. The other point is that we do, as you know, we have 4 properties. We have the church, we've got the land next door, we've got the parking lot, and we've got Sela. So kind of based on what the finance team might talk about and present, we might then need to consider doing something with our properties. It's not happening right now. It won't happen tomorrow. But at some point, we may need to look at what to do with our properties in order to ensure we have sufficient funds in order for the church to continue as how we're doing. So that's the bottom line. That's our way forward. Those are the things we're going to look at. That's the way we're going. We're coming off this treadmill of, I don't know what we're going to do. We're going to do this, or we're going to do that. What about this? Okay, we're clear. We've got a message. We're a Christian church. We're going to give that message out. We're going to do the best we can to help people in the community. We're going to do all those things that we can do as long as we can do them and we have the resources to do them. That's what we're going to do. And in the meantime, we're going to look at how do we continue to do what we're doing. The focus is on us as a congregation. You're the people that made this church. Your families are the ones that built this church. We're the ones that are keeping it going now. So we have to look at making sure we as a congregation are healthy and happy and going forward. That's what we're going to do. Any questions, comments about that? Russ.
These are not comments specifically about what Dennis was just talking about, but I forgot to, I forget a lot of things these days, but I forgot to mention before I made my earlier remarks that I wanted to recognize the governing board for the difficult position they've been in the last 15 months, trying to make decisions about how to go forward under all these restrictions with this terrible, terrible virus. And for those of you that may be sitting out there being critical of the work that the governing board has been doing, it's a difficult position to be in church leadership. It's difficult to be able to make the decisions that you know will affect a lot more people than you. So to all those who have served since the governing board was established several years ago, both past and now present, I think they deserve our thanks and continued prayers for their well-being and that they are guided in the right direction. So thank you, Governing Board.
Our brothers and sisters from WIMS are waiting to get in our building, so we're probably going to want to wrap this up sooner than later.
We'll wrap it up. Thank you, Pastor. Thank you, Russ, for those kind words. I want to take the opportunity here to thank Pastor Doug because he gives a strong, powerful, relatable message, biblically based on God and Christ and who we are and how we should be as Christians. So I want to thank Pastor Doug for his messages and ask that he continue to do that. Because first and foremost, we are a Christian church. We love our neighbors. We welcome everybody. We are inclusive, and we want to continue to do that. And that's our key message. We love God, we love Christ, and that's our story. So with that, I will say thank you all very much.